Okay, sorry for that. I'm going to be addressing here the four papers you have on your online or on your Dropbox. It's going to be the paper, the impact of brand communication on brand equity through Facebook. Okay, from Emerald, from the Journal of Research in Interactive Marketing, the one from the Journal of Marketing Communications, the one from the Journal of Advertising Research, and the one from the Journal of Strategic Marketing. It does not matter which one we start here, but I'm starting with the one from Emerald because of the abstract. What we have in terms of abstract here is going to be a few elements that the majority of the journals they need you to cover, okay? And you need to put this in the abstract as well. So let's go. The purpose of the paper, okay? I usually see people getting this wrong. This is not difficult. This should reflect exactly what you're measuring, okay? But put this into an academic language, but somehow a language that's easier for people to understand. So here in this one, okay, the purpose of this article, blah, 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 fill the gap. I'm mentioning here, Ferb created and user-generated social media brand communication influencing consumer-based brand equity metrics through Facebook. If you check the model itself, you're going to have firm-created and user-generated social media communication or social media brand communication right here, as I kind of name the two of them, and brand equity, okay? This is something I already addressed in the video with the scales and the conceptual model. So this is the purpose of the paper, okay, is to check this, nothing else, okay? So it should be reflected right there in the purpose. The methodology here, the design of the paper, how it was done, okay? So probably you're talking about the sample size right here, okay? You're going to be mentioned that this was a survey analysis. It could be any type of research. If you're doing interviews, would be interviews. If it was ethnography, it's going to be ethnography. This is like the method. How you check it that in the case firm created or user generated would be influencing CBBE, right? Brand equity, okay? What else? And then I'm talking here about brands that were three industries: non-alcoholic, clothing, and network providers, the mobile network providers. I'm mentioning here structure equation modeling, okay? And that's it, okay? If you need a little bit more, here I'm talking about it was check the metrics and so on. Findings. Okay, at this part of the abstract, briefly, I mean briefly, you needed to say what you discover in the paper, what's there, what were the results. Keep in mind that a lot of people, they're just going to read this, they're just reading the abstract, okay, and they're reading nothing else from the abstract. Unless they want more detail, they will go through the whole paper, okay? So the findings here, okay, showed that, you know, the relationships, and that's what you're going to be mentioning here, just the positive relationships, that the ones that were like statistically significant, you're going to be addressing them. Okay, now how original are the value of the paper? Sometimes you don't need to put this, but in case if you needed to put this, okay, you're going to be mentioned at this stage, okay, what's new, what's different in your paper, okay, and that's it. For keywords, you're going to be using mainly the variables you have in your model. If you check other papers as well, not only my papers, I'm using my papers because those are the reference okay, your guidelines. But if you check any other papers from these journals, you notice that's very similar, okay? Here I'm talking about the sample, I'm talking about the variables, okay? And this is going to be reflecting the model as well. It's just as the one from Emerald. Where's the model? Here. So in this case, okay, I'm saying that the purpose of the paper is to check how social media communication, so firm created, user generated, influence brand metrics, let's say, okay, so we have here brand equity, brand attitude, and those consequently influence behavior or purchase intention. This is going to be um, the objective of the paper, to test this if communication, if sorry, social media communication is influencing branding or brand metrics, okay, and those influencing purchase intention, or you can say here it's somehow behavior, right? The one from, let's say this one here, same story, okay, let's see the model. Or models. In this case, there are two. In this paper, I was checking like the micro relationship and the macro relationship. So brand equity, okay, as probably you notice from my papers, I use a Curse model that is a composition of brand awareness, associations, loyalty, and perceived quality. So that's what you see here is CBBE, and Cobras, that's social media behavior in terms of clicking, sharing, liking, creating content. Okay. So the overall idea of the paper is to see if brand equity influences Cobras. That's it. Okay. And then I check it into this macro perception, that's saying, just checking if someone really likes the brand, or if someone really prefers this specific brand instead of another one, if this is going to influence the person to click, share, like, create stuff on social media. Okay, check it from macro perspective, check it from micro perspective. You guys probably are using the micro level, okay? I most of the times I use the micro level. Question: why did I want to present the macro level? Easy, because if you're saying, okay, brand equity influence social media behavior, awesome, okay, but it's not like happening in a way. I could do just that, just the macro relationship, it would answer the question, the research question. However, if you need to know specifics, and most of the times we need, because we know that brand equity is associations, loyalty, perceptions of quality, and so on. And behavior, we can check different levels or types of behavior. So I needed to put in this way. Um, okay, so this is the abstract. All the abstracts, they're going to follow, once again, the same stuff. Okay, so if you have an abstract that's kind of one text like this, please, when you're reading the text, okay, just go back to any paper from Emerald and check, okay, if you find this stuff, the findings, the design, the purpose, okay. Sometimes you may not find the originality, but those three you will, okay. This is what's needed in any paper, okay. Right on. Introduction now. Now this stuff starts to get like a little bit complicated. The introduction, I would say, it's one of the most difficult parts of the paper to prepare, because you need to cover a lot of stuff. What you need to cover here? I would say like usually you want to start with the text just saying how important is the topic, okay? How important is the subject that you're investigating. You can relate that to business, you can relate that to the market, okay? You can use like information from, I don't know, magazines or online forums here. I would say like market information, okay? So anything that's like market related or market driven. So you're going to get here in the majority of my papers, okay? I'm selling or I'm putting to the reader, okay, the importance of the topic, why this topic is worth investigating, okay? Then you need to link that with the literature. And this starts to get complicated. Let's take a look here at the model. So the model or the objective of the paper, right, is to check if firm created and social in user-generated social media communication, in other words, if social media brand communication, okay, if this influences the consumer's perceptions of brand equity. To get to this, we needed to show, okay, the importance of the model itself or the importance of the topic. I needed to talk to the reader and explain the reader why it's important to understand the social media communication, okay, and why it's important to investigate the effects of that on brands or on brand equity in this case. So you need to put this very clear why this is important, okay? Uh, Research, it builds up, okay? So it's nothing that we just started from scratch, from zero. Most of the times we're following other papers, we're just like complementing other people's research, okay? So for example here, take a look at the first sentence here. The fast growth in popularity of social media across consumers and companies has opened a vast research field for scholars. This is a very important sentence because right now, okay, I'm addressing to the readers, okay, that a lot was done before this paper, and this is something you need to acknowledge in your papers, and you need to acknowledge that every time that you're writing an introduction. You need to say what was done in the field before. The problem here is that you need to be very focused. Okay, I could not be talking about social media in general because I would be talking forever. You need to be talking about the specific context you're into. Okay, so then I'm putting here in this like a very dense and compact sentence that studies checked word of mouth, social media advertising, online reviews, okay, brand communities, user-generated content itself, okay. Um, Once you put the studies, once you describe what was done in the field up to that moment, okay, then you need to link that with the research gap. Now you're introducing that what you are presenting in this paper is closing, or at least trying to fill a little bit the literature, okay, and filling the gaps of the literature. So you're mentioning here, okay, all this was done. However, at this stage of the knowledge, there like stuff missing, and what was missing, the investigation of, you know, brand equity in this case. Okay. Um, what else? You can go on here and then build more on the objectives and research questions, okay? In this case here, I formalized the research question. The research question now, okay? The research question should reflect your model. So always it's going to, where's the model? Always going to reflect the model. So probably it depends on the what you get. Okay, in this paper is not only the direct relationships. There is a little bit more happening there. So the research question is a little bit different. But if you're checking only these relationships, then the question is whether this variable or variables influence that variable. That's it. Okay. This is the research question, and the objectives, they are related to the research question. Okay, so in the case here, I asked the how question, okay, because it goes a little beyond, as I said, the identification of effects. But take a look at here the objectives. Identify the effects, okay. You could put in a different way. You could put, for example, whether X or variable X, whatever it is, influences variable Y. Okay. Again, after you introduce that, this is not necessary to put all this. This is very formal. Okay. You'll notice like that the research question, objective, it's the same. You're writing actually the same stuff. So sometimes you can only ask the research question or just say about the objectives, okay? So once again, let's make a little summary right here. I'm introducing how the topic is important, so I talk to the readers how important is the topic. After that, okay, I mention everything that was already published in that specific context. So building on that, I say, okay, all this was done. However, this specific information is missing. Okay, this is your gap. Then you need to precisely put there. Okay, that's a research gap, and this is missing, and then you're covering this gap in this paper. Awesome. Now you enter in the realm of the objective. The objective of the paper, okay, is to fulfill the gap, to cover the gap. You're closing the gap, okay? You're putting the objective of the paper. The objective of the paper reflects directly your conceptual model or your research, whatever it is. In the case we're testing a conceptual model, it should reflect the conceptual model. No more, no less. I usually see like a people putting the objectives, something that's completely not in the model, okay? And it should be as simple as it reads the model. It should reflect the variables you have right there. Okay, moving on, okay, that I put the objectives of the paper, okay, how I'm fulfilling that, how I'm closing that. Then you can briefly discuss about the statistics you're using, the methods you're using. It does not matter, could be like a, let's say again, qualitative, and then you're doing this through interviews, okay? After this, briefly, you're going to comment the contribution of the paper. Contribution of the paper now, it goes twofold, always. Literature and practice. So literature, what is giving this, what is this paper contributing to the literature? Remember that a few paragraphs before, you were talking about studies that were done before that. Your paper, it should be in the next paper someone's writing about that, your paper should be here as well. They should acknowledge all the papers that were discussing the topic plus yours. Okay? And then the final section here, the final paragraph, is about the structure of the paper. Literature review, methods, results, and then finally conclusion discussion. If we get other papers, you notice that the story repeats. Okay, same story. I'm introducing how important is the topic, okay, and then I'm going to be talking about the context itself. Okay, you need to, as I said, you need to sell the reader the importance of that. Take a look here. For several years, scholars have been focusing on the field of social media communication in an attempt to understand its effects on brands and brand management by studying relevant topics such as, and then I start to present what was done: word of mouth, online reviews, brand communities, fan pages, advertising, user-generated content. Okay, if you notice, this is going to be very similar to the other paper we were just discussing. Okay, because I was doing these two papers as complementary. They're just complementing themselves. Okay, same story. Despite the increase in empirical research into the topic, okay, little understanding, and then here I'm presenting the gap. Okay, to address this gap, you need to make it very visible. Okay, we aim to investigate the effects of, and then you put the variables of your model. Take a look here. The effects of firm-created social media communication and user-generated social media communication on brand equity, brand attitude, and purchase intention. Once again, it's the model. Okay? So this is very technical. That's why I'm repeating myself over and over, showing the examples here. Because if you put in the objectives something that's not presented in the model, then it's a technical mistake. Okay? Um, then there is a second gap that I introduce. I do more statistics to cover this gap. Okay? To address, take a look here, to address the gaps, okay, we formulated the following research question, okay? So, how do farmer-created user social media communication influence perceptions and behavior, both overall and with regard to industry-specific differences? So in the research question here, I'm addressing two gaps. In the case of one model, checking direct relationships, should be again whether X influences Y. Take a look at the structure here. It repeats that I'm using statistics or I'm using like modeling to observe, okay, the effects, okay. Then I'm putting here the objectives. This is very formal. It's a very formal paper because I'm putting research question, objectives, okay, to identify the effects, okay. Again here, take a look. To summarize the contribution, okay, towards the literature, and then you need to address as well practice, managers. Take a look. This paper is organized as follows. First, the literature review, the methods, the results, and so on. It repeats, guys. You're not creating anything new. This is how we write a scientific paper, okay? If you get this one, it's going to be the same. If you get this 2019, it's going to be the same, okay? Probably in this one, I'm not putting the research question. I think just the objectives. But you guys got the idea. Okay, Now we need to enter in the realm of writing the variables or the literature review. The literature review, you're going to be addressing the conceptual model, the variables you have in the model, okay? So let's pick, for example, this one. It does not matter which one we pick, okay? So let's check the model here. If it works. Where is it? That's here it goes. So the literature review here should be addressing the social media communication, the two variables, and brand equity, the variables in there. Let's check if this is happening here. Okay, conceptual framework and hypothesis, social media and brand communication. I started to write on the variables. Pretty much, guys, what you're doing all the time when doing this, you're explaining the reader, okay, what it is. The reader has no, let's say, we should not expect the reader to know the variables. So pretty much we're introducing and explaining what it is, okay, defining that. We're talking about what was done in the field about the. Keep in mind, you're explaining the variables, okay? You should not be talking much about research at this stage, but pretty much explaining what it is, okay? So I explain what it is, user-generated, firm-created content. Then I go through consumer-based brand equity. Again, I explain what it is. This is where you're going to be putting your definitions and addressing the text, okay? Addressing, sorry, the literature, saying what it is. Once you define the variables, then you start to talk about the relationships. Let me get another paper, just in case. Conceptual framework and hypothesis development. So again, I'm talking about firm-created social media communication, what it is. I'm talking about user-generated social media communication. I'm explaining what it is. I'm talking about brand equity. I'm defining it. I'm explaining what it is, okay? So the reader now knows this stuff. Let me get one more. Okay. Theoretical background and conceptual framework. Consumers' engagement with brands on social media. Okay, so I'm addressing the variables once again. COBRAS, CBBE. In this one, you'll notice that instead of starting with the variables themselves, I made this section here that's overall about consumer engagement, okay? It could be done sometimes. If you have space, you can do that. If not, then you just need to go straight to the variables. So I address the variables, and then, as I said, then we start talking about the relationships. So let's go for this one that's very clear. Effects on brand awareness associations. At this stage right now, and this is very important, what we are doing here, we explained to the reader what it is. In the case here, brand awareness, what it is, brand associations. Let's get another one right there. What is brand equity, right? We explained the variables. Now we needed to show, okay, the relationships. And at this stage, we're going to be using literature, we're going to be using evidence. So we need to prove that those relationships, let's go to the model again. We need to prove that this relationship exists, okay? And how we do that? There are two ways of doing this. Through logics, okay? Three ways, sorry. Through logics, through literature, and then through research. Ideally, you're using the three of them, okay? So, every single hypothesis you have here, in other words, let's make it very simple. Hypothesis is going to be the arrow. Every time that you have an arrow, it's going to be one hypothesis, okay? So if you notice here, H1A, H1B, okay? These are the influences of communication on awareness and associations. 2A, 2B, social media communication from the firm, from the user on loyalty, and C3 on perceived quality. So at this stage, what you need to do, you need to get as many papers as possible that are going to be proving that this relationship is true. Okay, sometimes you're not going to get like let's say here, effects on brand loyalty, right? Sometimes you're not going to find the relationships. It's very possible that you don't find because you're covering a research gap. So at this stage you can get like a papers that are different or like a relationships that are kind of different, but somehow through logics you can say, hey, listen, X influences Y, but in my case I'm looking for X influencing Z, and there's no literature on X influencing Z, but there is influencing Y, and we know from the literature that Y influences Z. Okay? So you're going to be putting formally your hypothesis, and your hypothesis go like that. The variable positively Portuguese, positively or negatively influences the other variable, okay? So the words you're using here: influences, impact, drive, okay? X drives Y, X positively influences Y, or negatively. Most of the times for marketing is going to be a positive relationship. All right, if you get this wrong, if you be creative, if you try to be fancy, if you try to be, I don't know, cool and push something different in here, you're just putting yourself into trouble. Because a hypothesis is something that we need to test through, through methods. In this case, we're using statistics to test them. So every single word you put in there, it will reflect on your analysis. So if you're using, for example, here, instead of influences, instead of impacts, instead of drives, then you're not testing a direct relationship. There's only those three words that you can use here, okay? Unless that you can put a fourth word that means just exactly the same, but I personally just use those three. Take a look here. Positive evaluation of firm-created social media brand communication positively influences perceived quality. Okay? If you have other relationships, you're going to be discussing them. And that's it. If you get other papers, same story. Take a look here. User-generated social media communication positively influences brand equity. Another paper. Let's see here. Brand associations positively influence consumer behavior engagement in terms of consumption, contribution, creation, controlled for age, gender, and social media usage. Let's check the model. In other words, brand associations here, 3A, 3B, 3C, okay? Positively influences consumption, contribution, and creation of social media content. And this is controlled for age, gender, and social media usage. I hope it makes sense. So far, so good? All right, let's go. Right now, let me finish with the whole paper because we're recording, and then questions are going to be after the recording. Okay. So summarizing the introduction, you're selling the importance of the paper, what was done, you put in the research gap, you're putting the objective, okay? The literature review, you're explaining the reader about the variables you got, you're explaining all the variables, and then you're introducing the hypothesis one by one. So every arrow you have in the model, you should be explaining the relationships. Once again, the literature review, the explanation of the variables is about what the variable is, okay, or what the variables are. The relationship between them, you're proving that one variable is influencing another variable, okay, through the means of evidence. I did not mention here, but but this is in the papers as well. You need to use a theory, okay, a theoretical explanation to prove, for example, that in the case here, let's see the model again, that communication influences perceptions, which consequently influences behavior. So you need to get a theory, okay, to say that these relationships, they make sense from the theoretical point of view. In the case here, same story. Okay, you need to get like a theory that shows or proves that perceptions influence behavior. This one as well. Whatever is the drawing. The communication influences behavior. So you need to put the theory there. Once you read my papers carefully, you'll notice how I introduce the theory. Please do the same, okay? So the methods now. Sample and procedure. All the papers, they're going to be exactly the same, okay? We start with the sampling, and we move with the procedures, how we collect the data. Let's see in this one. Okay. So the sample, okay, it was online with social media users. It was online survey. I used Qualtrics for that. Okay, discussing like the scales, how it was built. Okay, the blocks. Okay, with demographic questions such as age, gender, education, social media usage. Keep in mind that when you're building your survey, you're going to get like the demographics that represent the context, okay? So usually, and the sample, of course. So demographics such as age, gender, education, consumption patterns, they're always going to be there. Then you have the scales to measure brand equity, 4 measurement blocks. In other words, 4 pages of Qualtrics were used for each brand equity dimension, Where did I get the scales from? And then the cobras, 3 dimensions, okay, 3 blocks, from 1 to 7, from 1 to 7. It was in Polish, the questionnaire. I'm talking about back translation. Was tested with business students. In other words, it was a pilot test right there. Okay. And then you are addressing issues with the pilot. Take a look. I'm explaining the survey and I'm explaining the sample. Uh, Here the problem was not using probability sampling. I needed to discuss that. The respondents, they were informed about the study, so how you know asked them to join the study. They were picking a brand. The brand was used throughout the survey. That they could only take the survey once and rate just one brand. How many people took part in the survey. That I'm rejecting surveys that were not completed. Invalid, okay, were empty surveys, like when people were not like answering fully the surveys, okay. I'm talking about the standard deviation equals to 0, little variance, okay. So I'm talking here about the threshold I use from 1 to 3, 0.1 to 0.3. What else? The final sample, how many people survived the standard deviation and all this stuff, okay. And then the structure, female, okay, the age, education, social media usage, or the demographics we had right there. The amount of brands, okay. Measurement and procedures. So a CFA was used, tested for like a kurtosis and skewness, Cronbach alpha, reliability, factor determinacy. Okay, so pretty much I'm saying like what was used. The loadings, okay, I'm talking about average variance extracted. I'm talking about the tests for that. I'm talking about the model fit for the CFA. Okay, I'm talking about common method bias. You don't need that, but I'm just showing here the procedures. Results and implications. Now you're starting to talk about the effects, okay? So I'm talking about, because there were 2 models reporting the effects, the beta. Let's talk about the micro relationship. The model fit for that, okay? The hypothesis one by one. So take a look at this. H2 introduces that CBBE, the dimensions, follow a direction, structure, blah, blah, blah. So I'm pretty much like reminding the respondent about the respondent, the reader about the paper, about the hypothesis presented in the paper, right? Brand awareness positively influences brand associations, and then the statistics, and the statistics, and the statistics, and goes like that up to the end. Okay, so every single hypothesis you had, you're going to introduce that. Awesome. We're almost finishing. So now the discussion. The discussion is going to be into theoretical and practical. If not like this is right, right there for the reader, right in the face. But if it's not right in the face like that, then you need to put in the text, okay? Uh, take a look here. Building on the traditional hierarchy of effects model, okay? This is, I'm talking about the theory I used to support the model. Then you need to address the stuff that was in the introduction, the objectives. This is like a, not to repeat yourself. People here, they tend to repeat themselves, say the same stuff that was there. Come on, you don't need to do that. What you need to do is to address what was before. So in the introduction, you're saying all this was done, I identified this gap, the objective of the paper is to close the gap. Now in the conclusion, you're saying, okay, the gap was the following one. Okay, you go for the, a reminder to the reader about the gap, the importance of the paper, and then you're going to add to the literature, okay, the theoretical contributions of that. So you're addressing the theoretical about the table in here. This was the journal just because of the printing. Ideally, tables, they should be here in the methods, okay, in the results. You should not have any tables or anything in the discussion. So addressing, you need to address all the relationships one by one. It's not so complicated, but you need to address that in the point of contribution to the literature, always, okay? A problem here will emerge if you have a hypothesis that was not statistically significant. So if you found a relationship to be not significant, then you need to, well, you need to justify that. Because in the hypothesis, when you're putting the literature review about the hypothesis, you're promising big time, you're promising X influences B, let's say, okay? It influenced A and influenced C, but B, it was not there. But you were saying, like, proving through evidence, through literature and all that it would influence B, and it did not. Now you need to justify, again, based on the literature, why not? And not easy. It's not easy. So you needed to read more on the topic and figure out why it was not possible. So as you notice, here and here, it was non-significant. So if you read carefully my discussion, you'll notice that right there, I was needing to justify this. And trust me, it's not easy, because if you really believe the relationships are going to be there, once they're not there, you need to say, well, something happens here. Something happened, and now I needed to figure out what was that I had no relationships. And this is just going to be a supposition. You're supposing that could be something different. Okay? Contribution to the marketing now, to practice. Okay? Now you're going to be telling the reader how he or she can use the findings. So from the practical point of view, what they can do about your research, how they are going to be addressing their practices using your research. Again, if you start to just to be yourselves without linking back to the literature, this is a technical mistake you need to cover. Bending the text always with the perspective from practice, how they can use that, plus blending this with the literature. Okay? Limitations and further research. The limitations here is going to be all the problems you had with the paper. I mean, all of them. Because we could not cover everything we wanted. We had the problems with the survey in terms of reach of people. We always have problems, and you need to acknowledge them. Okay, further research. Well, since you did the job to know what was before this paper and what are your findings, how they blend with the literature. At this stage, you're probably more informed than the reader, and you should here indicate what's next, what could be done after this, what's still to be researched. At this stage, you can put as well the hypotheses that were not statistically significant, what could be done there to figure out. And that's it. And that's your paper. Okay, the references, you're not doing this manually. You're going to be using software for this. I recommended Mendeley for that. That's free. You're going to have your tables. Again, the tables with the items and descriptives. The loadings you need. I usually port the R-square, the t-value. It could be done if you want. But the loadings you need, the mean for each item and standard deviation for each item you need, and skewness and kurtosis you need. You also need to report where did you get the scale from. So all the variables you have in your model, you should report the scale, once again, the loading, the mean, the SD, the skewness, and kurtosis. Okay. What else we get here? We get the correlations table, right? The variables with the alpha, the CR, okay, the composite reliability, right? In case if you compute the AVE or any other statistics related to the variable, this is where you put them. Factor determinacy, you're just going to get this with M plus. This is very similar to CR and alpha. It's just another way of computing that. Okay, and that's your paper. All right, so I'll finish the recording and then we're going to go through questions and answers and discuss that. It was long. It was about 1 hour and a half, I believe, or 1 hour. Please watch this as many times as possible. I addressed all the points in the paper in here. You're going to read the papers and then you're going to match with your notes and with what I'm saying here, and you'll notice that's going to make sense. All right? So let me finish the recording.